Hello everyone, I'm Lynda Kinkade. Welcome to CNN Newsroom. We begin now in the city of Cologne, Germany, where protesters from the right and left sides of the political spectrum are squaring off over the migrant policy. These are live pictures for you from the central square. Dozens of women were assaulted there over New Year's Eve, allegedly by men of Arabic or North African descent. Authorities have identified 31 suspects so far. More than half of them are asylum seekers. The violence rekindled debate over whether Germany can integrate a massive wave of immigrants. Senior international correspondent Atika Shubert is live for us in Cologne and joins us now. Atika, we know that 31 suspects have been identified, half of them as asylum seekers. Just talk to us about the anger there and the protests that are going on behind you.
Well, there's a very real anger, but most importantly, these cases have really shown how deep the divide is here in Germany. I just want to talk you through where we're at now. We're very close to we're right by the train station and the cathedral. This is where a lot of those assaults and attacks took place. Behind me is a group of left-wing protesters. They were here initially to show solidarity for the victims of those assaults. But now, as you can see, up at the front especially, there's a much more harder line, and they've been chanting no racism, no Nazism, and they've been chanting that to those people on the other side there. You can see a number of riot police, and in the distance there you can see flags. Those are right-wing protesters from the movement Pegida. That is the movement, the anti-Islam movement here in Germany. They have come out to protest against refugees and to say no refugees are welcome, no more migrants into Germany, particularly from Muslim countries. So what we have is this divide between the right and the left. They're protesting right next to each other, which is why you see so many riot police here, trying to keep those groups apart, trying to keep tensions to, a non-violent level, allowing people to express themselves, but trying to make sure it doesn't get violent. That's how these assaults have really affected people and triggered this anger and tension on the ground, Lynda.
Okay, yeah, we can hear that obviously very vocal behind you, and we can see the barricades dividing the two sides of protesters. Is it likely that they will march or move from their set positions at this stage?
We know that the Pegida protest is expected to march in a circle around, and the left-wing protest is also expected to do the same. But I'm not sure, it's all quite fluid at this point, whether or not police will actually allow them to move. They may feel it's better to control the crowd where they are. As you can hear, very vocal. What tends to happen, because we're right by the train station, is that whenever a group of Pegida protesters comes out from the entrance, they will taunt them, they'll yell out insults, they'll make several rude gestures, and in response, you'll hear shouting and yelling from this side, and vice versa. To be honest, there are groups on both sides spoiling for a fight, and this is precisely what riot police are worried about.
And Atika, just give us a sense of how long this protest has been going on for so far, and what is the ratio of police to protesters?
Well, I don't have the exact number of police out here, but there is a very heavy police presence because they've been very concerned about this. The first protest started at noon. It was described as a flash mob, and it was very peaceful. It involved hundreds of mostly women, but also men, residents of Cologne, showing solidarity, singing songs, saying they wanted to be there to support the victims of those assaults. Then we had this much louder group also arriving. And this group, particularly right here at the very front of it, is really about confronting Pegida, confronting those right-wing protesters. They want to say that they're against that policy that Pegida stands for, which is anti-Islam, anti-migrant, anti-refugee. They've been carrying signs that say refugees welcome. While on the other hand, on the right side, we've seen banners that call refugees rape refugees, for example, not welcome. And so this is just showing how clearly the divide is, how these assaults have really played into the fears of the German public here. And unfortunately for many people here, it's just this anger that's building and building. And this is one of the ways that it's expressing itself.
From where where you are, is it possible to give us an indication of the numbers on both the left and the right side of this protest? Are you able to give us some perspective as to how many on both sides?
Yeah, I mean, I can safely say that there are several hundred, particularly on the left side. If the camera pans around slightly, you can see it's a sizable crowd here. It's not in the thousands exactly, but in the hundreds. And it's enough, you know, to make a statement, a show of force, and it's enough for police to be concerned that if a group like this comes up against a group on the right side of several hundred more, then you could end up with a very serious clash on the streets. What we've been seeing, and you might be able to see a little bit of this as the police move in, as you can see they're moving in now, what they've been trying to do is often extract people from the crowd who they believe are provocateurs. And as you can hear that chanting in response from the left as they see some of these right-wing protesters trying to approach them. So what police do is they try and get in between. They also try and extract anybody who's perhaps trying to infiltrate the opposite crowd, the opposing crowd, and to provoke some sort of a fight. They try and do this throughout the protest to keep things as calm as they can. But it's very difficult to do. This is some of the toughest kind of police work you can imagine on the streets because it's such a fluid and dynamic situation. So hopefully it keeps relatively calm. But as you can see with that shouting in the middle there with the police, tensions are simmering. They do threaten to boil over. Police, if they can, will try and keep it as quiet as they can, despite the fact you see this simmering anger, Lynda.
And these protests, of course, were triggered by a wave of sexual assaults on New Year's Eve in that square. More than 100 women made complaints about sexual assault. You spoke to some of those women. Did those women complain mainly about the lack of police presence or the fact that these attackers may have been migrants?
Absolutely. I think what was a big concern for a lot of the women was the complete loss of control on the streets by police. And this is one of the most heavy criticisms as a result of this, is where were the police, why weren't there more, and so forth. To be fair, the Cologne police in particular have been really, they've been understaffed for quite some time. The refugee crisis here has really meant that a lot of police in cities have been drawn out to the borders to help process and keep track of a lot of the refugees that have been coming in. And as a result, there haven't been as many police in the cities to maintain the kind of presence they would need. What's interesting is that the number of police this New Year's Eve was actually double the amount that they had last year, because they were anticipating the possibility of terror alerts, for example. But that was still not enough to keep control of the crowd in front of the train station. So a lot of the women said they called out for help, but nobody responded. They went to one police officer who was so overwhelmed that he didn't know who to help first. So there's a lot of questions, tough questions being asked about policing, about refugees and asylum seekers and migrants, about the responsibility of finding out who they were, where they are, who may have been involved in the attack. So all of these questions are still out there. There will be a parliament session on Monday, a local parliament session, where a lot of these questions are going to be asked, but perhaps more importantly, a lot of those police reports from that night, the details will be coming out. And that's why a lot of the public are out today, because they want to know exactly what happened.
And of course, the chief of police in Cologne was fired in the wake of those attacks. Can you give us a sense of what Angela Merkel is facing? Obviously, there's a lot of pressure on her when it comes to her migrant policy. What is she attempting to propose right now?
Well, she is under the spotlight now, and she's under a tremendous amount of pressure because she has said to the German people, this is a challenge that we can accept and that we have to face, and we are up to it. That the entire nation is able and willing to shoulder the burden of as many as 1 million refugees coming into the country. She made a New Year's address thanking the people for their patience in welcoming so many. But now, with these assaults, what we are seeing is the critics are using it as ammunition and saying, look at what the refugee policy has brought. Now we have dozens of assaults in Cologne on New Year's Eve, and it seems to appear to involve a number of those migrants who came in. Now, police have been pointing out still that nobody has been charged with these crimes. There are simply only suspects at this point, but that hasn't stopped public opinion from questioning whether or not the country has taken in too many people, whether or not police are so overstretched now that they're not even able to control the streets of their own cities. So you can easily see how that's stoking fear and how Angela Merkel now faces possibly the greatest challenge, certainly of the refugee crisis, but even possibly of her political career here.
And give us a sense of who is helping to organize these protests. Are there leaders on both sides that are pushing, I guess, pushing from both sides with their own agenda?
Absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of different agendas at play here, and it's very difficult to sort of tease out who's doing what. But what's clear is that the protests that are happening here, these are not organized by political parties. These are organized by smaller grassroots groups with certain political views. So on the one hand, you have, for example, the left-wing movement behind me, but on the other hand, you have the right-wing Pegida movement on the other side. And the Pegida is a group that specifically is against Islam, against refugees, against migrants, and it has been now for several years. So it's not a surprise that they're out, but the fact that these assaults have happened does galvanize a certain amount of public opinion behind that. And German society finds itself caught in the middle between all of these opinions, trying to decide and find a reason, a way through this, and figure out who's got the best policy. It's a very tough time for the country, and this is really bringing those divisions and tensions to light.
Certainly some very vocal protesters behind you that want their opinions heard. Atika Shubert, some great reporting there in Cologne. Thank you very much.